Okay, now let's discuss this matter further with Michael Markovitz. He's, of course, the head of the media leadership think tank at the Gibbs Business School and also happens to be a former board member of the public broadcaster, the SABC. Michael, good afternoon. Welcome to today. A pleasure talking to you about this matter, which I guess is very important, especially if you only consume free-to-air television. I mean, the SABC going to the Competition Commission describing MultiChoice's decision to be equivalent to bullying tactics. I mean, at issue here is also the fact that about 3.2 million households will be denied the opportunity to watch the Rugby World Cups because there are strict conditions being set by MultiChoice as well, preventing the games to be shown on OpenView HD, which is owned by our parent company here, eMedia.
Yes, Dan, and thanks for having me on. First, I need to just correct something that seems to be a misperception. SABC lodged a complaint against MultiChoice SuperSport in July 2022. So it's nearly 14 months since that complaint was lodged at the Competition Commission, and it was about the previous rugby tournament that was held in 2021 with the British Lions came to South Africa. And SABC was in negotiation with MultiChoice then, and MultiChoice insisted that SABC could buy the rights, but it was not allowed to show those rights on any other platform other than terrestrial, that's analog, or digital terrestrial. In other words, it wasn't allowed to show it on its channels on OpenView, it wasn't allowed to stream it. SABC asked MultiChoice to relent because it believed it was anti-competitive. MultiChoice refused, and therefore SABC Board felt that there was no option but to lodge a complaint for anti-competitive behavior to the Competition Commission. So that complaint was lodged 14 months ago, and we've heard from the SABC that that complaint has been kicked into next year. So when Minister Kodwa says he hopes that a ruling is imminent, that's not the information that I've got.
So the imminence of it would be next year?
Well, that's what we're hearing. And also, I think one thing that viewers need to understand is that SABC is both a buyer of rights from SuperSport, but it is also a competitor because SABC Sport is the only standalone sports channel outside the SuperSport stable. And therefore, it also competes with the SuperSport channels, but it's free. And it's free on OpenView. And I think what's very important is that SABC should be allowed to show its rights, which it buys very expensively, on any platform it so desires. And the fact that MultiChoice has insisted on restricting this in the contract again, despite there already being a complaint for exactly the same behavior, is very, very disturbing.
So MultiChoice here should be allowing the SABC to show all the games.
Well, it's, you know, Dan, even if it was 16 games, the point is about where it's being shown. You know, if SABC could only afford to buy 16 of the games, but at least it's the opening and it's all the Springbok games, I think one has to be satisfied with that because it's not possible for a public broadcaster to afford all the games for the tournament. I think the most important point is that SABC, once paying buying expensive rights, should be able to show those games wherever it so chooses on any SABC channel. And SABC's got 4 channels on OpenView, and it should be able to show them to 3.2 million households. That's 12 million people that are not going to get access to the games who would expect to get them because they get SABC channels. But Dan, I want to make another point which I think is being missed. You know, it's quite ironic to hear government ministers praising the deal, saying it's great to see that so many people are going to get the games. But the irony is, Dan, is that government had been wanting SABC to switch off that analog transmitters in the 4 biggest provinces. And the previous board, which I was on, pushed back saying there wasn't an alternative network that was big enough to cope with that switch off. And so there was pushback on switching off those analog transmitters in the 4 biggest provinces. Now, can you imagine if that switch off had happened and MultiChoice insisted on these anti-competitive conditions, only a very small, under 1 million households on DTT would get the game. So I think it's a bit ironic that if SABC hadn't pushed back on the switch off, it would have a much smaller audience at the moment. And I think that's a point that's being missed by many, and I think should be taken on board by government when it decides when that analog switch off should happen. Because there is now, thankfully, and I must make it very clear, I'm very, very happy that SABC has managed to secure the rights so that millions of South Africans who are not subscribers to MultiChoice can see the games. But one has to register one's disappointment that these anti-competitive conditions have persisted even in the wake of a complaint to the Competition Commission.
Now, Michael, broadcast rights, especially around sports, have always been an issue, especially between the SABC and MultiChoice. You've just explained to us that 14 months ago, the SABC Board then lodged a complaint against MultiChoice, viewing its behavior as anti-competitive. Where is the real problem here? Because you've also made another key point. These rights are not for free. You buy them.
Exactly. Look, Dan, the problem goes back a bit further because, as you know, that the primary regulator for broadcasting in South Africa is ICASA, not the Competition Commission. The Commission has obviously jurisdiction over the whole economy. But SABC didn't first just run to the Competition Commission about sports rights. It went to ICASA when ICASA was amending its sports rights regulations and made very, very cogent submissions that it should follow the European model, which does not allow these rights to be sold to a single buyer. In other words, what MultiChoice has done with South African Rugby, with PSL, for instance, have buys all the rights, and that includes free-to-air, radio, etc., and sub-licenses them to people like the SABC. Now, that is not lawful in Europe anymore. Europe does not allow sports bodies to sell all the rights to one buyer. They have to unbundle it. And SABC asked ICASA specifically that it passes regulations to require that sports rights bodies unbundle these rights so that there's a number of different packages, a package for pay TV, a package for free-to-air, streaming, etc. Unfortunately, ICASA, when it amended its regulations, did not include any of SABC's proposals. So therefore, this kind of situation is being allowed to persist because of what I would call regulatory failure on behalf of ICASA to deal with this very issue.
I was about to ask you, in your view, you've just answered that, has then the SABC been disappointed and let down by ICASA, who is the broadcast regulator?
Yes, I mean, the thing is if you look at the legislation that ICASA operates under, one of their key objectives is to protect the integrity and viability of the public broadcaster. Therefore, everything that ICASA does from a regulatory point of view has to keep that in mind. Yes, of course, it's got to promote commercial broadcasters like the one that you work for, like MultiChoice as well, but it's got a primary goal to protect the viability of the public broadcaster. Now, when it produces regulations that basically gives the pay TV monopoly a blank check to accumulate all these rights, some of which they can't even monetize themselves, I think it's very disappointing. Yeah. And I think that's why the SABC had no choice but to approach the Competition Commission. And we would really urge them to expedite the matter. I
was going to ask, to conclude, Michael, how helpful is it taking it to the Competition Commission?
Well, I think it is a competition problem, Dan, because what you're talking about is a market, and you're talking about a market which is dominated by one particular player. And therefore, when you're a dominant player in any market, in any part of the economy, you have a duty to behave lawfully in the practices that you conduct. And therefore, the Competition Commission may actually be a better regulator to deal with it, because the SABC has asked it to come up with a remedy that would prevent this situation from reoccurring, would prevent one player from buying all the rights from the sports federation, and would give other players a chance to bid for those rights and not have to sub-license them from their competitors.
Yeah, and that needs to change, I guess, over time. We'll have to wait and see when the Competition Commission will make a ruling. In the meantime, 3.2 million households that watch their sports on the SABC's platforms and OpenView HD will not be able to do so, according to where we are today. Michael, thank you very much for your insights, your explanations and time here on Today. That's Michael Markovitz, the head of the media leadership think tank at Gibbs Business School and a former SABC Board member.